Virology, the podcast about viruses, the kind that make you sick. From Microbe TV, this is TWIV, This Week in Virology, episode 692, recorded on December 10th, 2020. I'm Vincent Racaniello, and you're listening to the podcast all about viruses. Joining me today from New York, Daniel Griffin.
Hello, everyone.
How's it going, Daniel?
Today was a long day. I think it's getting pretty bad, and we'll talk about that. But let me start with my quotation. Wise men say, only fools rush in, but I can't help falling in love with you. Now, some of our listeners probably know who that is by. That's Elvis Presley. What people may not know is that he is referring to the polio vaccine when he wrote that song.
Are we going to exhume him and revaccinate him with SARS-CoV-2 vaccines now?
We probably didn't want to do it on the show, but let's do it. I just want to let everyone know Elvis is actually still alive, and he's returning for a COVID-19 vaccination next week.
Excellent.
Well, you can see it here, right? No, I'm joking on that. I wish Elvis was still with us. What a tremendous, talented individual he was. But let's start a little bit. I'll get back to why that quotation. Why are we not quoting Winston Churchill? Why Elvis Presley? But we will get there. But I just sort of bring some people up to date, patient updates. Everyone keeps seeing these numbers, but I like to put a face on the numbers. We actually, Vincent and I were together on a call about a week ago, actually, this last week, and Shane Crotty was on, and he was talking about issues with reinfection, and there were a couple of physicians on, and that Shane Crotty's data is really great and all, but we're seeing reinfection. I think I've talked about that a few times. My partner today called me, and we discussed a case. This was a gentleman who was admitted originally back in March, had a pretty severe case of COVID, and now they're back in the hospital. They're septic. We did a COVID PCR, and it was positive, right? So pretty hard for me to say that, wow, what is this, 10 months later, that's somehow persistent from the March of 2020. So we're seeing cases. A number of physicians were on the call saying, we're seeing these, but you know what, we're busy. We're in the trenches. We don't have samples from March and April to do the genetics. So this raised a concern. Don't think that just because you had it, you don't have to worry. There's a certain percent of people that are getting reinfected. We don't know what percent that is, but we'll see as we go forward. Had another gentleman, and this brought me back to the Irish patient. I don't know if people remember. People who've been longtime listeners may remember the Irish patient, a young man in his 30s, and I felt like it was, back to March again. Admitted another gentleman in his 30s, no past medical history, really sick. Basically did the same things that we learned from our Irish patient. The person was so ill that we had to intubate him. We had to lay him prone. He's really on maximal vent settings, and we're hoping that he's going to make it through this. But really, really sick. People have another sort of misperception out there that, the virus isn't so bad this time. Yeah, it's bad. We're seeing the aftermath of Thanksgiving, which for me is kind of tough because now we're admitting families, right? And we admitted a couple sisters. One of them died Monday morning. Her sister's still alive, but on a ventilator. And today I admitted a mother, and she was quite upset because she said, you know what, Dr. Griffin, don't worry so much about me. What I'm really worried about is my daughter, who's right here in the room with me. The daughter went to see her mother-in-law for Thanksgiving. The mother-in-law actually fainted on Thanksgiving, and then was diagnosed the next day with COVID. They were trying to help the mother-in-law. Everyone was trying to do the right thing. People were wearing masks. The mother-in-law was wearing a mask. They took the mask off the mother-in-law, sort of helped her kind of feel better, got her to the hospital. But that whole event led to her getting sick, the mother getting sick. Basically, the whole family is sick. So, I guess I'll move right into the exposure period with this. I try to keep giving people the facts so they can make their own decision. And it's difficult when people make bad decisions, and I see the consequences of that. We're here for you. We're going to take care of you. I'm here to educate you, to give you the information you need to make the best decisions. But just keep these facts in mind when you're thinking about what you're going to do. Tonight is Hanukkah. Coming up soon is going to be Christmas, Kwanzaa, New Year. So people are making plans now. We had over 3,000 people die in the U.S. just yesterday. Things are really bad out there. And we're going to get to the fact that the vaccine is really right here on the horizon. So let's try to make some good decisions. Also in the pre-exposure period, let's go back to the schools, right? There was a nice article in the CDC MMWR. This was implementing mitigation strategies in early care and education settings for prevention of SARS-CoV-2 transmission. And it looked at 8 states in the period of September through October. And that's the time to look, right? I mean, I've seen studies where they talk about infections between like April and September, and schools were closed. I don't really know what you make up stuff with that. But this was a really good article. And, the CDC has been beaten up a lot, but there's really some great people, and they're really putting some great information out there for us. And this article described the role of mitigation for Head Start programs. And people in the U.S. probably know about Head Start, but the rest of the world, this is a really tremendous program. There's Head Start and Early Head Start. And these are programs for kids 5 and under, and it promotes early learning, healthy development among children. And what did they do here? So they provided quite a bit of guidance, information on masks, personal protective equipment, the physical setup, so you could do this in a safer situation, supplies for actually maintaining those healthy environments and operations. They even there was financial aid in all this, helping them get additional staff members so that they could have smaller class sizes. And when they implemented all these programs, they actually saw very few cases of transmission among the children and the staff members. So just sort of helpful to see. We went into this, we didn't know. We're learning, can we do things that make it safer to be in these environments? And I think just more information that we can. I always know that this triggers is sort of a wedge issue, sending kids to school or not. And so I always try to make the qualification that this tells us that you can do it safely. It doesn't say you are doing it safely. So if you're looking at having kids in in-person learning environments, you can't just do it. You can't just make believe it's, 2018 and stick 30 kids, a couple feet away from each other. This was a study showing that you can make it safer with proper mitigation, with spacing. And now we're seeing in a lot of areas they're really introducing testing, actually becoming a big issue here in the New York area because, as people probably are aware, our rates are really climbing. And I look on the map and I see that where I live, I now live in a red area. That doesn't mean we're socialists or communists. It means we've got way too much COVID. So we need to, if we're going to ask those kids to go to school, if we're going to ask those teachers to be there to teach our kids, we got to give them the necessary resources, the necessary guidance. Can't just send in those folks. All right, vaccines. Vincent pulled me away. It was like, the Super Bowl, it had gone into extra time, and then Vincent's like, it's time to record TWIV. So again, what was going on right before I jumped in is the FDA was having their EUA meeting and discussing what to do with the Pfizer vaccine. I know a lot of people are thinking, actually, by the time this drops, we'll know, the outcome, the final score. And it does look as though there will be an EUA for the Pfizer vaccine. And the discussion was just about what will be the definition, what will be the confines of that. So we'll go through a couple things here. But before we get into vaccines, I want to point out we're getting here near the end. We're in the 11th hour. I know everyone's exhausted, but I want to tell a story. And hopefully this story is something that maybe gives people a little bit of thought about, my gosh, I've got to keep safe because we're almost there. So this is a story that I asked my mother to retell this past week. And it's the story of my grandfather's best friend, my mother's godfather, Howard Miller. And this takes place. It's 1945. This is a true story. Howard Miller is at the Rhine River in Europe, right? It's World War II. He's a captain in the 2nd Armored Tank Division. I don't know if people realize, but 1945, that was when World War II finally ended. So World War II had just come to an end in European theater. News of the German surrender is spreading across Europe. This day in